Welcome back to the Trailblazer Pod. I'm your host, Faye, and each week I bring you stories of Jewish women who are paving bold paths. This week's guest is Jessica Cohen, who only a few days ago became Cleveland Heights City Councilwoman. She is also lead counsel, analyzing and advising on AI privacy and cybersecurity laws and regulations at Verizon. She clearly has never shied away from ambition. Whether navigating law school, confronting anti-Semitism, or balancing multiple roles, she's consistently turned obstacles into opportunities. Her story is a powerful reminder that public service isn't just about policy, it's about people, perseverance, and the courage to step forward when it matters most. Let's dive in. How you doing?
Good, thank you. So nice to meet you. Thank you so much for inviting me. This is really exciting.
Of course. Thank you for joining me. I'm not gonna lie, there's obviously so many women I admire, but then I come across people like you and I look through your resume and I'm like, oh my God, the amount of stuff that you've done. And also, I'll tell you what I admire the most. The amount of different kind of things you've done. You're not just in one lane, which I think is something that I think we're told a lot. Like, stay in your lane, stay in your lane. You kind of are all over the place in the most inspiring way. So truly, when I came across your LinkedIn, I was like, who's this woman? She got to come on the podcast. So I'm very excited to get into it, but it also left me a little bit puzzled. Where am I taking this conversation? Because it can go in so many different directions. So let's see what we'll be able to cover.
Sure. Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. It's New Year's Eve, so I'm really excited to get the year started with this episode. I want to start from the very, very beginning and to understand who you were as a little girl and how that made you the woman you are today, because it's so unconventional, the path that you've taken, in a beautiful way. So can you share a little bit, what was little Jessica like? Where did you grow up? What was life like?
Yeah, well, I grew up in a very typical Jewish family on Long Island,
Mm-hmm.
very typical. Conservative, Jewishly, very traditional, lots of Yiddish, lots of bagels and lox, like all the things you think about when you think of,
Love it.
Jewish New Yorkers. But I think what was different is the generation. So I'm an older millennial, and even though my mom was a stay-at-home mom, my parents were very much like, you could do whatever you want, it doesn't matter, and I was one of those kids where, some of my kids right now don't have the same orientation, but I knew what I wanted to do or what I was
Mm.
interested in from a very young age. Like my mom's, who saves everything, like all Jewish mothers, has a notebook. We uncovered this notebook from second grade where I was like, I want to be a lawyer and I want to be the first woman president of the United States. Like, what 7-year-old?
I love that. I love that.
So that just gives you, I think, a little bit of a window into
Mm-hmm.
kind of how I was. And I was always very driven, very wanting, I knew what I wanted to do. And then when I was 16, I knocked on the door of my congresswoman's office in her
Of
district.
course.
Right. And I said, hey, do you want a free intern? And they were like, sure. And that really kind of got
Wow.
me going. But yeah,
Do you have siblings?
I have a younger brother. We are
Okay, so
two
you're the
very different
oldest.
people. I am the oldest, yes.
Same. So I just sense a little bit of the older sibling syndrome going on here,
Yes,
which,
yes.
I appreciate. Um, you did mention, you post a lot on LinkedIn, which I love, and you've spoken about, either it was on LinkedIn or an article, about noticing gaps in the system through your father's work as a public school teacher. And I'm curious, can you share what you meant by that? What did you observe that influenced your interest in public service and the system and changing it and making it work?
Yeah, and this was also something I feel like is really ingrained because my parents were those typical, and I mean, my mom, as my dad passed away a couple of years ago, but the
Oh, I'm sorry.
typical kind of Jewish, like Democrats, were my dad was a public school teacher, so the unions and how they've helped move and shape society and help the everyday people, that was all. And even my family's story, and most Jews, right, we're all immigrants at some point to the United States. My maternal grandfather escaped Russia during the Bolshevik Revolution. His parents did with his family, and then again he came and he landed in Buenos Aires, Argentina, and then escaped persecution again to the United States. So this idea of helping those that need help was something
Yeah.
that was really part of my ethos, and I think that that stayed with me, whether it's the work that I do every day or the work that I saw what was possible through government, right? Government how I think shapes the world we live in and how people can overcome difficult circumstances, and it serves as that safety net. And all of that kind of came from, I think, my parents' politics, my
Yeah.
dad's experiences being a New York City public school teacher for 38 years by the time he retired, and seeing those that are not as fortunate and that really struggled in the system. And that all kind of shaped how I saw and viewed the world.
It's so interesting. This is why I asked the questions about like your childhood, because I think it's fascinating how it leaves like imprints even from your grandparents and your great grandparents, and
Oh, sure.
it's almost like a
Yeah.
genetic code
Yeah.
that's left in us. But you were talking about you're 7 and you wanted to be a lawyer, but you didn't pursue law until later on, and we'll get into that. Can you share early career pre-law, what that looked like for you, and like how that happened?
Yeah, and that's in itself, was an interesting path for me because, as I said, I did not grow up observant or orthodox, and I really loved politics. I spent
Mhm.
a lot of my late college years, late high school years, early college years working on political campaigns and seeing politics as a place to go. And then also in college, I became more observant. I started to affiliate with the Orthodox community, and I realized that sleeping on people's floors for political campaigns and eating fast food in the middle of nowhere was not a very, quote unquote, firm
Mhm.
friendly lifestyle. And so I really pivoted and I ended up in the nonprofit space, first consulting for nonprofits, in terms of grant writing or foundation relations. And that was, very kind of saw that as a direction where I could raise a family and still
Mhm.
make a difference. And so for the first 12 years of my career, and also I got married and
Yeah.
about a year after I graduated. So, and then I had my oldest daughter about a year later. So all that, having that 9 to 5 nonprofit role, that was kind of where I found myself. And I did both government advocacy. I ended up back doing some government relations work for those nonprofits and public policy work, but I also did fundraising and nonprofit management and led teams. And so all of that gave me kind of a really varied experience, also in
Mhm.
different sectors and different types of nonprofits. And I loved it, but it wasn't exactly what I had wanted, when I was a little girl.
Yeah. So I have two questions on that, because in this podcast, when I first started this podcast, I was like in a weird pivoting moment in my life, and I had a little bit of a hard time with it. Not the action part, but more like reconciling in my brain like this is not what I went to school for. Did I waste my time? And then I had women on the podcast who were older than me. I was 28 when I started, and had so much wisdom, and they all had pivots in their life, career-wise or personally. And so it really taught me a lot. And so it became a theme throughout almost all the episodes. So I want to ask you, when you were going through, you became more observant and you had to make that decision, this sleeping on floors is not the lifestyle for me.
Right.
Was it something that I just want to ask you about that journey? Like, was it hard for you to come to that decision? Or was it more decision was made and now I'm going to figure it out? Like, just talk to me a little bit about what went through that and how you dealt with that.
Yeah. I mean, I think when we're 21 or 22, we don't understand what that type of decision actually
Yeah.
means. And
Yeah.
so at the time, looking back, it just seemed like a natural progression. Like
Mm.
I need to find something that works better for me. But I think the impact of it was waking up 12 years later and saying, okay, I have 4 kids. I've been in all these different nonprofit roles. I have all these skills and abilities that I can bring to bear in different ways. And I'm still not a lawyer, even though,
Mhm.
I've kind of gravitated to those type of projects and things like that throughout my career. So I feel like it was at the time not an issue at all, but it
Mhm.
did lead to a moment where I was feeling that I hadn't really fulfilled my purpose and I hadn't really dug into my dream. And I hadn't
Mhm.
even, to the extent that I hadn't even talked about it. So the night that I went to my husband, and like my youngest was 4, and I was like, I think I want to go to law school. My husband was like, what? I was like, yeah, it's always been a dream. He's
Wow.
like, what? Like he had no,
Wow.
I never talked about
Mhm.
it. Like I got a master's in between. I was like, oh, instead of going to law school, I'll get,
Mhm.
a master's I can do from home. And like I've kind of always what's the word I'm looking for? Like managed
Com
or
Okay.
compensated, right? Like
Mhm.
compensated for this. But I never really talked about it. And I think that moment was like a curtain had been opened, or,
Wow.
and I think that was the more pivotal one than
Mm.
just making what always ends up being these natural life progressions and then really figuring out where you want to end up.
It makes so much sense because it's like when people go through things, you're in survival mode, and then you have it's like after the storm that you get to like deal with the repercussions, or sometimes it's
Yeah.
positive, sometimes negative, sometimes it's the in between. But I think it's a natural instinct for our bodies or our brains to go like, this is what I got to do now. It makes sense. I'm not gonna like wallow in it. And then 12 years later, you have maybe the time to think about what you want, right?
I mean, I had 4 kids in 6 years. Like,
Yeah,
that's on its
exactly.
own insanity, but who had time, like, to think of I was just thinking about, does this job
Yeah.
serve our lifestyle? Do I enjoy doing it for now? And am I making enough money to support,
Yeah,
this
exactly.
along with my husband? So, yeah, it's like survival mode is a perfect
Wow.
description.
Okay, so this next pivotal moment, or the real pivotal moment when you did
Yeah.
choose to go to law school, like how long did it take you from having that conversation with your husband to actually applying and starting the process?
Yeah. So the one thing I did, which I'm pretty proud of, is that I made an effort to meet with a lot of lawyers because I made the
Mm,
decision that I wasn't going to take this huge step unless
mm,
I felt really positive that what was at the end of it was what I wanted to do. So
mm.
I met with
This one.
tons of lawyers, and I had known so many. I know from all the work that I had done, just in the Cleveland community, we have tons of lawyers here, lots of Jewish lawyers, lots of not Jewish lawyers. So, I met with a whole bunch. I asked them about the LSAT. I asked them about what the law school, work was like. I asked them about the work that they did and whether they liked it and how it all works. I asked them about salary because it didn't make sense to jump,
Wow.
from where I was unless I could see, a greater, income opportunity at the end of it. And so I did that. I think it took me about, I'd say like 6 months of like
Mm,
meeting whatever. And then by then it was already June of, I think, 2018. And I basically decided I was just gonna let me take the LSAT, right? Let's
mm.
like start there. And of course, I had a friend of mine who was like, "Oh, it'll be easy. Just is a month enough to study for the LSAT?" He was like, "Good, just go, just do it. It'll be fine." And of course, I had to pick the one LSAT date that wasn't on Saturday, and like
Mm.
that whole getting back into that whole complicated piece. So anyway, I spent a month doing some practice tests, took the LSAT. I got not what I had wanted as like a very high,
Mhm.
achiever, but then I called the Cleveland State University here and I said, should I take it again? Like, what do you think? Could I get into the part-time program? And they said, oh, you could get in and you could get scholarship. So I was like, how much scholarship?
Very practical.
Yes, which I wasn't, and again, like this is all like I have a family, I had to
Yeah.
work, all these considerations that 25-year-olds going to law school maybe don't really have. And over those next 3 or 4 months, they said, well, if you apply now, it's like the earlier you apply, the more scholarship money is available. And so
Wow.
it was about, I guess, 9 months after I started thinking about this that I had applied. I got in, I got almost a full ride to law
Wow.
school, thanks to Cleveland State University that does exactly this, right? Support non-traditional law school students. And by October, I was like ready to go. And then I spent the next few months getting organized. I had to trying to figure out how to make it work with my current job. We couldn't. So then I was looking for another job and I started in August 2019. And
Wow.
yeah, yeah, about
Wow.
a year or so afterwards. Yeah.
It's like so quick, but you also gave yourself enough time to do like the due diligence. And I think that's sometimes a benefit when we have when we're older, because again, like you're saying, when you're 25, you almost jump head first. But sometimes, the saying like, careful what you dream for, because
Yeah.
people end up in law school and then a year later they're like, whoa, this is really not what I wanted, or really
Yeah.
not. Same with medical school. So I think it's something that people can learn from. I'm a big like, I have an idea in my head and I go for it. And I'm actually trying to teach myself, take a minute. Do not just I'm good with research, but like think about this. Like, is this really what you want? Because once I'm in, I have a hard time quitting, even if I'm not enjoying it. So, this is a really good piece of advice for me. Like just, chill for a second, think about what this really means for your life. But then, go for it if it actually makes sense, which you did.
Yeah, I even took I even kind of did, when they do admissions, you could go and visit a class and sit in a
Mm,
class. And I just remember like sitting in a couple of those classes being like, oh my gosh, this is what I
wow.
want. Like I loved, a lot of people do not like law school. I loved it. Like I loved the learning. I mean, it was a lot of work, tons and tons of work and everything, at night and on the weekends, but I loved it. And so like
Yeah.
every class I took was just a reinforcement that this was the right
Yeah.
decision.
So cool that the 7-year old in you like kind of knew without even knowing, and then
I
your adult you
know.
was like, yeah. So
Yeah.
you did, if I'm not mistaken, you talked about losing your job in a, what was it, a startup kind of thing?
Yeah.
What was
Yeah.
it?
Yeah.
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 First semester of law school?
Yes.
Okay.
Very
And you had
unexpected.
4 kids. Okay.
Yes.
So how did that, again, another thing that I think young women can listen to, like paths are not linear, things happen all the time. What did that chapter in your life teach you? Like how did that add to your resilience? Because I feel like you already were very much at that point. Sometimes we are like, I already went through so much. Like, why do I need more lessons?
Right.
But somehow we need it, right? So just if you can share what you learned from that so that we can learn from you.
Oh my gosh. This was, one, there was definitely a part of me at the time where I was like, what? Like I am a
I'm sure.
professional, right? I went to Harvard. Like
Yeah.
people like with my experience are not supposed to just have their positions be eliminated. I've always gone from like job to job. So like that
Yeah.
first like hit almost like it's like an ego hit and you're like,
Yeah.
okay, like I have to like
It's
it
very
made
human, I
me
think.
yeah, yeah, and I was angry, and it was right
Yeah.
before the holiday. It was like on the Monday before Thanksgiving, and like it was just so overwhelming
Mhm.
at first. But one of the things that, like, one of the lessons that I saw, like, very clearly, because I was unemployed for 5 months, although I got my job maybe like 3.5 months later, and then I just waited, I waited till after Passover to start. But the first thing I kind of noticed bit by bit was like the incredible like divine providence that happened in everything. Like I had had a lunch meeting scheduled with a former executive in Cleveland who had actually gotten let go from her
Mm.
job, and we like a few months earlier, and I'd had that lunch on the books for months because we had to
Wow.
like coordinate schedules, and it she was the first lunch like 2 days after I got let go, and she was like, "Let me tell you everything I know about getting let go from like a big
That's amazing.
role, and I'm going to tell you exactly what you have to do now." And it was like for
Wow.
me, I was like, "Oh my gosh, like at least with all the emotions that I was feeling, I felt at least like, okay,
Mm.
there's some sort of reason, rhyme and reason in the universe. And
Yeah.
here's like, what are the
Here she
odds that
is.
right here she is. And so I took all that. And in fact, one of the things she told me was to get on indeed.com and look
Mm.
for jobs. And I
Wow.
did. And that's where my current role, came from, how I found
Came
my
from
job. Yeah.
Verizon, that one?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And I networked. I mean, and the other thing I learned was that so many people, like when you have a network of people, like people care about other
Mhm.
people. Everybody I asked was willing to go out with me and for lunch or a coffee. They were so kind. Like obviously when you're unemployed, and I try to do the same now when people come to me, like they paid for lunch or they wouldn't let me pay for my
Wow.
coffee, and I what like to be very honest, I was worried about
Yeah.
finances and all of that. And even that was like this care and concern that all my friends and business network had for me just like shone through. I had friends and people who I'd worked with in the past who said, "Are you doing some consulting? Like, let's think about how we can have you help us out temporarily so we can,
Wow.
frankly, like get you a little bit of cash, and do
Yeah.
some meaningful work."
Yeah.
And even that was like, even if it was way less than I would have been making, in a full-time job, it's still every bit helped at that point.
Absolutely.
My parents were there. Like I didn't have like a personal computer. My parents gifted me a computer. Like this type of stuff where
Yeah.
like you really feel it was almost like being wrapped in a
Mm.
blanket of care and concern and love.
Wow.
And I feel like that's what we can offer to each other in those difficult moments. And so that was a very big lesson of what I could do for others, like in the future
Wow.
of giving back. But then also I think this idea of, it did like every time we needed money, there was like some sort of consulting thing that came through, or every
Just at the right
time,
time.
yeah, just at the right time. Or
Yeah.
like whenever I had a job interview or whatever, I happened to be meeting with somebody who maybe could help with
Wow.
that, or had, so all those little pieces. And that was the other lesson, was to look for like those signs that it will be, okay. And then the
Wow.
last lesson, which I try to impart with others, is that almost everyone I met with told me what you're going to end up with is going to be better
Mm,
than what you had before. And you don't believe it now, and you're
yeah.
angry that I'm telling you that, but it's true.
Yeah.
And that is exactly what happened. And I maybe acknowledge that that doesn't happen to everyone, but hearing it, it's hard to hear when you're in it. But looking back,
Yeah.
the fact that I got let go before COVID with enough time to find a
Mm,
job before the whole world shut down,
wow.
that was a blessing in disguise, where I was really mad it was in before the
Yeah.
holidays, but if they had waited, maybe I wouldn't have been able to get this job. And all of those pieces and parts. So it's just like thinking about having that state of mind where like it seems really bad right now, but this all has kind of a purpose. And like
Mhm.
you'll only see it at the end, and kind of sit in that for a little bit. I think
Yeah.
that helped me quite a bit during that time as well.
Wow. Thanks for sharing all that. You really sat and you recognized,
Right.
the lessons it taught you. But I think that's a big reason why women are starting to open up more about like not always, the sunshine in their life because,
Yeah.
I think it's like even you said, it hurt my feelings that, it hurt my ego that I got let go. And so a lot of us like retreat and we don't want to share that part. But then, when you do, you had that woman talk to you about when she was let go and how the steps that she took. So I think it's so important for people, women and men, but obviously we're geared to women here. We actually show those sides of ourselves and our lives because it's people can take actionable steps from other people's experience, after you got let go, you got this job at Verizon again, like you're saying, it
Yeah.
happened when it was supposed to. And I want to ask you, you continued at this job after law school, but I want to ask you specifically about, let me first ask this question. How do you feel about the word balance?
I think, is that enough? No. I don't think it exists. I don't
Yeah.
know. I don't think it exists.
Yeah. What do you
Um,
think is like the alternative to that?
So I actually thought about this in one of my master's degree classes, because it was
Oh,
like on leadership or something like that. And I happened to be at the time working for an incredible woman who was around my mom's age, and was one of those women who really, like one of those women bosses who really wants to see other women
yeah. Yeah.
thrive. And I ended up in the course of like writing this paper, whatever the assignment was, talking to her about it. And I feel like it's about where you want to put your energy, right? Because people always say, well, there's only 24 hours a day and whatever. But you can, if you want to put your energy into something like law school, like, working out every day, like a job that has you travel, across the country all the time, which not me, I'm just giving it an example.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like it's those, that's where you put your energy, and the compensation happens like with a spouse for those who are married, or, finding ways to hold up the other pieces of your life. In my case, which I'm super transparent about, like my husband is incredible, and he cooks, he cleans, he does the laundry. My
Wow.
life
Yeah.
and the path that I have taken would not be possible without everything that
Yeah.
he's taken on. And we say all the time, like this idea of 50-50, we're like 85-15. Like 20 or
I
25
love
when
it.
time, but like we are
Yeah.
not, like when he takes care of the kids, doctor's appointment. I mean, like really the
Wow.
mental load that women
Yeah.
are known to hold, I do not have to hold most of that. Okay, so I picked right when we when we
No,
got
I
married.
like that you're sharing that though. That's important
Yeah.
for people to hear. Yeah.
And I am so transparent about that because people like are like, oh my gosh, you have 5 kids? Like, how do you do? I
Yeah.
don't. I don't
Yeah.
do it all. Like,
Yeah.
I don't. Yes, do I pick up the kids? Do I run my carpools? Yes, but I do the morning. My husband does the afternoon.
Right.
Like, do I fold laundry? Yes. Do I do the laundry? No, my husband does. Do I cook
Yeah.
occasionally? Yes. Do I cook every night? No, my
Yeah.
husband does. So, this is just like people need to know because it's not as if it's like
Yeah.
magic, and it just happens.
Yeah.
Like there is this balancing, but there's also about like we've decided, or like
Yeah.
we've, come to this place where I'm putting my energy to where I want to be, which is, my job was law school. Now it's, I was doing some city work and nonprofit boards, and now
Mm.
I, ran for office. I'm going to be on council starting, I guess tomorrow.
Yeah.
So,
That's next up in the conversation.
yeah. So, so I think it's not about balance. It's about deciding where you want your energy to go
Yeah.
and figuring out how to compensate. Sometimes that's using money to purchase things like
Yeah.
food and help and things like that. Sometimes it's your spouse, sometimes it's you taking a step back, but it's been for me a very deliberate calculus for
Yeah.
me about how we manage this and how I pursue where I want to put my energy.
Yeah. I love this because I really very much relate. I don't have children, so that's a whole different thing.
Yeah.
But in terms of like, I've been working out 6 days a week for I think 11 years now, and people are always like, shocked, like how do I make time for that? And for me it's just a non-negotiable. It's like the same way I make time to have lunch, I make time to go to the gym, and it's a
Right.
very similar thing. It's not like I'm balancing, it's just this is where my energy is going. I'd rather go to the gym than go out every night for dinner, right? Like it's just different. So I very much relate to that, but I've never thought about it in terms of like your energy. It's kind of like this like bubble, and you have a certain amount of energy that can be allocated into certain things, and you have to
Exactly.
decide what's important to you. But like you're mentioning, you added on another thing.
Yeah.
You went to law school, you have this amazing job at Verizon, which I didn't want to ask you too much about that because you've done other podcasts where you talk about specifically this work at Verizon. So I'll link it in the description. But before I ask you what your motivation for running is, I want to ask you, like, do you feel like you have this like chip on your shoulder? Like what keeps making you feel like I want to take on more. I want to do more. Like, is it a personality thing? Do you feel like you still have more to accomplish? Like, where's it coming from?
Yeah, so my husband's asked me that before because we have very different
Okay.
personalities. Like, what? Like more,
Yeah.
I think there's a couple things. One is I really feel like this idea of like you only live once
Mm,
and like how can I give as much of what I can offer? What roles can I play? How can I give the most? And
mm,
giving, again, to my kids, like to my family, to my husband. But I feel like I have a very deep seated sense that I have skills, abilities, intelligence that I can use to help make the world a better place. And maybe that's not the most modest, feeling in the
I
world.
was just thinking, it's so refreshing to hear you be proud of that and not be modest. You're not bragging. You're saying these are things I believe I have. How do I utilize them? And I think too many times we're too scared of being, very open about that, and we're like, I'm gonna be modest and like timid, and like that doesn't work when you're trying to accomplish things. So actually, thank you
Yeah.
for saying that.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you appreciating it because, I feel like sometimes women, are exactly that, meant to kind of diminish what we
Yeah.
can offer. And I feel like everything that I've kind of taken on has been like, I think
Mm.
I could do this, like, moving to a corporate job. I was in, nonprofits for so many years, fundraising from people in roles where I was like, I could do that. Maybe I should be the
Yeah.
one giving the money, not raising the money, And so that was like an idea. Going to law school, like, hey, I still want to do that. I could do so much more as a lawyer in my professional role. Like, I feel like I need to take this path. And then I think similarly with running for office, I've always been involved. So two things I think are part of it. One is, since I was a little kid, I always felt the government was a place where you can really change people's lives for the better. And I had my Congresswoman Carolyn McCarthy, who I worked for, she was the epitome of what it means to
Wow.
be a public servant. So for me, that example has always been really important to me. And so I've always tried to, within my limits, right, of having kids and nursing and being pregnant and raising little toddlers and babies, what could I do? And so I served on, city boards and commissions, but I always felt, again, since I was like 7 years old, maybe earlier, who knows, that if I was in an elected office, I could really make some positive change. And I think that for me, I wasn't necessarily thinking about this year being the year. It's
Yeah.
always been in the back of my head, and we could talk about, why I decided to run this year. But for me, that's been a constant, is how can I, is this idea that serving in public office can change people's lives, and that's a role that I want to play, even with all the things that come with it, like running for office and, all of
Yeah.
that. And I think my skills, the other piece is, it's a good fit. Like, some people don't like running for office. They don't like sitting in meetings. They don't like being the center of attention. That is like the opposite of me, like, and when I was campaigning, I also felt that same feeling I felt when I went into my law school classes. Like, oh, this is
You belong here.
exactly, yes, I am meant to be doing this, and I feel good about it, and I love it, and it gives me energy, and I can make a difference ultimately because of it.
Yeah. I also have this like insatiable appetite to like accomplish things. And it's not just
Yeah.
accomplish. It's like there's certain visions in my head that don't, my dad is always like, how do these things connect? They don't. They're just a part of me, that I want to
Yeah.
like eventually do. And a lot of times I'm like, Fate, like stop, like you're enough. And I shouldn't, but this is what it's like people, you hear these like voices from people or in your head where it's like, stay in your lane, sit down, you've done enough. And so I genuinely mean this when I say like hearing you, the way you talk about other women and how they inspired you, and then you're doing that for me, and I'm sure for all the listeners. It's just so refreshing to hear women stand proud about what they've done and what they still want to do, and that not only is it okay, but we should embrace it.
Women can be ambitious, and you
Yeah.
can pursue what makes you feel like you are accomplishing, your life's goals, your mission. And I remember even like back in college, I was in a lot of these political circles, and I was at Harvard. So a lot of, top name elected officials would come, visit campus, or I was campaigning and I met people. And I remember going up to the governor of Louisiana, who, by the way, had 6 kids. And my question to everyone was, how do you do it? Right. It was already, so like, I think that I say all the time that I stand on the shoulders of women who came before us. And it is absolutely necessary that women in our generation right now do the same for like my daughters, the women who are going to come after, because that's where the inspiration comes from. And we should feel like we are living in a world where women should be able to do whatever we want. It doesn't matter if you have kids. It doesn't matter if you don't have kids. It doesn't matter if you're, if you're Jewish, if you're observant, if you're not observant. Like, people should be able to pursue their goals regardless. And if that's the one message I leave behind, that's the one. Yeah, that's the one I want to resonate for sure.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about why City Council, and posted yesterday, the day before, about your incident with anti-Semitism and how that kind of, played a role in this. So honestly, it's just so sad that we have to talk about this, but it's just reality. What happened there and how that kind of led the path for City Council this year?
Yeah. So like I said, my youngest is 3. I wasn't planning to run this year. Again, in my head, maybe, in a couple of years when she's a little older, or, my job is a little less crazy. But I've been serving on the Cleveland Heights Planning Commission for a decade. And 6 of those I've chaired it. And over the last couple of years, we've been moving some pretty interesting and big zoning changes. Again, as city topics go, I can't say zoning is the most controversial, like kind of the work gets done. I guess what I discovered in last May, with the publication of a news article that quickly snowballed into a lot of other news articles, is that the wife of our former mayor had not only issues with the zoning changes that we were putting forth, but I guess that triggered a extensive amount of anti-Semitic comments about me that she was making because her husband gave her access to City Hall. She was there almost as an employee for a lot of his term, and she was making these comments to other employees, some of whom were Jewish. And one employee who later left the city ultimately filed an EEOC complaint about these anti-Semitic comments, creating a toxic or hostile
Mm.
work environment. And then they released that EEOC complaint to the press. And the press, of course,
Wow.
the mayor was already very beleaguered for a lot of other scandals that were happening and a really bad budget process last year. So all of that was happening. This was kind of like the cherry on top, to be
Yeah.
like give a terrible metaphor. So it kind of blew everything up. And it was all about me. And I had no idea. I had never met this
So
woman.
you found out when it was published?
Yeah, exactly. Like the article was published. My phone started blowing up. I had zero idea that any of this had happened. And it happened in the year prior. Like it was like a year old
Yeah.
by then, which again, just went along doing my business in the city in this very part-time appointed position. I had no idea what was happening behind the scenes, although it explains a lot about why my legislation never moved forward in the end. So that was retrospectively, I was like, oh, well, now this all
Yeah.
makes a lot of sense. But so this was May 15th. And two, I think again, like that blanket of care and concern that I felt in hard times, people I'd known, I haven't spoken to for years, people that I talked to every day, it didn't matter. I had so many people reach out to me when this news broke and just send their support and their love and all the things you want to see from allies and friends and even acquaintances that I had barely interacted with, reached out to me. I would get stopped in Cleveland Heights. Like I would go to the store or something and people would stop and apologize, and say how sorry they were to hear about everything. And thank you for my service and all that. So it was really, and in the course of that, a couple people said, you've been talking about running for office for a while. Maybe like there's open seats on council. Maybe you should run, and again, like, giving a lot of credit to my husband. We've had these conversations where like our whole life changes in one conversation, but we're sitting talking about, again, like every night, this type of thing like blows up your life really, and every night we would sit and talk about like what had happened that day, what needed to happen. Do I need to call my lawyer? Do we need to tell the kids? Do I need to call my mom? Like every day was another conversation about this. And in one of them, I said, maybe I just have to run. I mean, if the insinuation of so many of these comments is that Jews cannot be in public service without some sort of dual loyalty, maybe we have to show them what actually we could do. And my husband looked at me and he was like, maybe you do. And it's just like one of those.
I love that.
Yeah. And that was it. And then I feel like I was on a train, that left the station. I mean, I had to get clearance from my work, which I did. And they did it. They knew that it had to be really quick because I had like 2 weeks to pull petitions and get like over 600 signatures. So they were, I'm really very grateful to everyone in the company that, vetted this for me super quickly. And then I pulled petitions and I let people know. Then I, got a little campaign team together. We got 600 signatures in 6 days. I mean, people were driving past like where I was getting signatures and like jumping out of their car. They so very wanted to like see this kind of redemptive effort, which I was so appreciative of. And, that was it. Filed the signatures June 6th or 7th, and then ran a really good campaign.
And then you start tomorrow. Like nobody, I feel like they need to do a documentary on this, like this little like where it started. And I love that you turned it into something so positive. A lot of times, aside from anti-Semitism, people get bullied or whatever, and it ends up just affecting people very negatively. And you took that energy, and again, like you were saying, the redemptive part of it, which is beautiful. But I just like the fact that you did this in a 2-week turnover, like that's wild to me. Wild. But I want to understand, in the city council position, what does your platform stand for? What do you want to accomplish?
Yeah, I mean, and I think this goes a little bit interconnected with the last administration. Like, not only was the mayor and his wife, anti-Semitic and caused all of this chaos, but also the city has been mismanaged for the last 3.5 years. We've gotten back on track. He was recalled with 82% of the vote. We've had an interim mayor who's going to be on council with me. He was like the council president and got reelected this election also, who's really righted the ship so we can have a normal start. But there was so much mismanagement, and there are so many issues that remain, that was another part of the motivation, is like, we need to fix this. We need better basic city services like snow removal and tree like leaf pickup, and it's snowing right now in Cleveland. It seems like we're doing much better already, but we just have suffered from a lot of mismanagement. And again, I wanted to bring in like the education I've had like on public policy and public administration, but also, I've run programs, I've managed teams, I've, all the
Yeah.
things that you need to be able to look at an organization and say, this is what we need to do better. And I think the added bonus we have for that is not just me, but we actually have our mayor that was just elected in this. The new mayor is incredible and
Oh,
really collaborative, and I'm really excited about what's going to be. And then our council, everyone who got elected was the group of candidates that I was rooting for and supporting. And so I think that, we're going to start with fixing whatever needs to get fixed from the mess that we have inherited. And then it's about like, what can we do? Like, where can we be creative? And for me, I want to use my strengths. I'm a cyber privacy and AI attorney. So how are we leveraging technology in the city? Are we secure as a municipality? Are we protecting residents' data? I want to bring that
such a unique
mind.
perspective.
Yeah, yeah, and nobody else on council
Yeah.
has that. But then also, again, like just that common sense public policy. I read legislation all day, every day. So, reading legislation, proposing legislation, working on budgets. I've managed multi-million dollar budgets in
Wow.
some of my nonprofit roles. So it's really about continuing to right the ship. And then what do we need to move this city forward and be able to attract more people, have an exciting commercial base where people want to come and visit our city, be good for families and seniors. I mean, there's so much we can do. And
Wow.
it's a big city. We have 45,000 people here. It's a
No
lot.
biggie.
No biggie. We're going to do it.
Yeah. It's so funny that we're recording this the day before you start. So like by the time this comes out, you'll already be, actively in this position, and I can't wait to see what you do with it. I want to end off by asking you, we're talking about wearing these many different hats. You're a mom, you're a wife, you work at Verizon, you have the cybersecurity, the AI specialty, you have nonprofit experience, you're a lawyer, now you're doing city council. Do
Right.
you see this as like different hats or lanes, like, or do they somehow connect for you?
So I view it as buckets. I don't know,
Mm.
and maybe for the listeners out there who have kids in kindergarten where they like talk about filling their bucket, it's like this social emotional thing that all kindergartners seem to do these days. But like, how do you fill your bucket, right? Are you kind to people?
Mm.
Are you doing what you want to do? And I I see it as buckets, right? I have my public service bucket. I have my
Mm.
mom bucket. I have my wife bucket. I have my work bucket.
Wow.
And I'm not constantly, but I would say regularly kind of evaluating how I feel. Like, am I filling my bucket in this
Wow.
area? And not every bucket gets all the attention all the time, but I definitely see it as as that. So not necessarily different lanes, but like, how am I
Yeah.
managing each bucket, and how am am I getting what I need from
Yeah.
each bucket that I am managing?
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
All these questions that I ask, I'm very glad I asked you. I feel like you were the right person to answer these questions. But honestly, thank you so much. Like, I'm obviously very inspired every time I talk to a woman, but I really appreciate you sitting down and talking to me about everything, like the whole, even though maybe to on paper it doesn't seem like it connects. It obviously does. Like your journey took you where it's supposed to take you, and you're not even close to being finished. You're literally
Yeah.
starting a whole new chapter now. Thank you so much for sitting down with me today and for sharing all that. I really appreciate it, and I can't wait to see what you do.
Well, it was my greatest pleasure.